There's 34 different spells we can use in Hogwarts Legacy out of a possible 80 in the wizarding world. So I'm going to walk you through 10 new spells that we could use for dark magic purposes that I think have a real potential to be included in a future DLC or Hogwarts Legacy 2, as the gameplay opportunities are just too good for the developers not to at least consider them. And let's first start with the Firestorm spell, which was a charm that produced a large ring of fire around the caster's wand and themselves, famously used by Dumbledore against an army of Inferi. It could also randomly fire jets of flame at enemies not initially caught in the circle of flames, which could work perfectly in this game. In fact, we already have seen the fire tornado animation cast by enemies, so the design is already there per se, and we also have the Incendio spell, which when activated also sends out a circular ring of fire. So by combining these two spell designs here, we've pretty much got this Firestorm spell in game already, which would allow us to build upon the already established fire spells, doing a serious amount of damage to enemies and kind of utilizing it as the ultimate crowd control spell. Now, the caveat being, I reckon that we'd have to stay still to cast it to then channel its fiery effects, where we could then be interrupted by an enemy, subsequently cancelling our Firestorm. And by the way, this spell is actually different from the Find Fire and the Protego Diabolica spells, which I spoke about earlier in another 10 spells video, which I will link at the end of this one if you're interested, as I don't want to kind of repeat myself here and waste your time. Now, opposite fire spells, we have ice charms, and I think we definitely need more of them in game, as well as water spells, because right now we only have the Glacius charm, which is why I think the developers could look at including the dark magic cursed ice spell, which famously spread around Hogwarts in 1974, encasing everything and everyone it came in contact with, and was very difficult to dispel. Now, this could build upon the established Glacius spell, where when we cast cursed ice, it could immediately jump to multiple enemies in close proximity to one another, subsequently encasing them all in ice and immobilizing them temporarily. This would be another great way to crowd control a lot of enemies and do significant damage to them using a follow-up Defindo or fire spell in quick succession. But not only would they be frozen, this ice curse would also dish out some ongoing damage over time, just like the Frost Nova spell followed by a blizzard, which a mage can cast in World of Warcraft. And let me tell you, those were the good old gaming days. They don't make them like that anymore, is what I'm trying. That's what I'm trying to say. Now, this jumping spell effect has already been created by the Crucio Mastery talent, where a curse debuff will hop from one enemy to the next when hit with Crucio. So it's all kind of there in game already, which is really quite exciting. But I'll tell you what else is an exciting thought, and that's the idea of implementing Legilimency, which could be included in a future DLC update, which was the magical act of navigating through many layers of a person's mind, which is essentially mind reading with magic for all intents and purposes. And what's super cool about this is that if we decided to learn Legilimens and then cast it on an enemy, we could then look into that NPC's mind, who would then perhaps share some secret knowledge he or she knows, like certain bosses hidden on the world map, or high value loot chests, or significant points of interest that would be worth us visiting in game that we kind of just breeze past. It could also show us clues or lead us on a treasure hunt by showing us glimpses of locations in the game inside their mind, which we then have to find ourselves. In fact, in the Shadow of Mordor game, you can read an enemy's mind and find out the connection that the orc has with other orcs higher up in the food chain. And I'd love something similar to appear here in the next update or DLC, as it would fit into that Wizarding World lore, as Voldemort used Legilimens all the time on his victims. And by the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, please do leave a very quick like down below. I really do appreciate it, so thank you very much. Now, the prospect of casting the head growing curse on an enemy really appeals to me, because not only did Ron mention this curse in the books as he came across the skeletons of double-headed muggles in Egypt when he visited the tombs there with his family, but we could also use this dark magic curse on enemies that could potentially then go insane after growing a second head instantaneously. And it could be really cool to see them then begin firing off random spells in combat, a similar mechanic actually to when we cast the Imperious Mind Control curse on enemies and they do our bidding for us for a short time. The caveat to this being that they'd also fire spells at us directly, so pretty much sending an NPC wild here, which would be a great distraction for us to use while stealthed in combat, or generally just for a little bit of dark magic fun, as it could be a good laugh listening to the NPCs having a conversation with themselves. Now, we actually already have a blood curse talent in the game right now, whereby dealing damage to other cursed targets inflicts damage to all cursed targets, which is one of the best ways to Avada Kedavra and one-shot several enemies in just one go. However, a blood curse, otherwise known as the blood malediction curse, is a hereditary affliction that is a genetic defect in the witch that would often resurface centuries after the curse had been cast, usually through a dark wizard cursing someone and then their subsequent descendants paying the price hundreds of years later for something that they didn't do. Nagini, Voldemort's snake, famously had this exact curse where she eventually transformed fully into a snake, which is what happens with this spell or this blood malediction curse. And referencing Shadow of Mordor once more here, perhaps when we do die in game to an enemy NPC, they then become our rival and then get stronger in their magical prowess and abilities, where we have this blood curse inflicted upon ourselves until we then defeat the enemy who has then defeated or killed us in game. Now, this gameplay mechanic is actually called a Nemesis system, which was created in the Shadow of Mordor games, where when you are killed, that orc or enemy then levels up and is then harder to defeat next time you go against him. And guess who has the patent for this Nemesis system until 2035, where no other studio in the world can implement this in their games? And that is Warner Bros. They have it, and they haven't used it in any of the games since. So to see a Hogwarts Legacy Nemesis system would be incredible going forward. I really hope that they utilize this technology. Now, another thing I'd love to see going forward is an inclusion of the portrait curse, which imprisoned individuals in portraits, where the longer a person was trapped in that painting, the quicker the person would then go insane. And after coming across a floating mirror on the south coast of the map, which I'm actually going to show you on the world map here, by the way, because as far as I'm aware, this mystery hasn't been resolved as to why it's there. I still think it's kind of a bug, but there is a skeleton close by. I'm not so sure. I think it's there intentionally. But anyway, this got me thinking, because perhaps we could summon a portrait at a similar size to this floating mirror in the game from our wand, which would then suck enemies into it, instantly removing them from combat, similar in terms of a in-game animation to when we recall our Thestral or Graphorn into our magical creature bag, but instead of a suitcase, they're being sucked into a portrait, essentially. Now, what would be even cooler is if the summoned painting could then suck in several enemies at one time, and maybe we could even set it on fire after they're all in the painting. Brutal, I know, but this is a dark magic video for you here, and it could be the perfect spell for stealth playthroughs as well. Now, one of the best mechanics in Hogwarts Legacy, in my opinion, is its flying, and I'd actually love to see the Unsupported Flight spell added into the game in some capacity in the future, which was a spell that allowed a witch or wizard to fly without the use of a broomstick, notably demonstrated by Voldemort and his Death Eaters. And I think this could definitely be possible for us to do in game, considering that we already have the flying mechanics built into the game by the devs, but instead of a broom, we just need some dark magic or light magic auras surrounding us as we fly through the sky, just like the Death Eaters or the Order of the Phoenix members, as a visual example here, depending upon your own allegiance in game. Now, this would introduce a vertical type of gameplay where we don't just fight on the ground, but could also utilize verticality by being able to jump across the combat area quickly, utilizing this spell, which I would even consider being a upgrade from the swift dodge apparition animation that we already have in game. So expanding this within the lore in a kind of gameplay mechanic would be great fun to see. Now, I very briefly want to show you how I play Hogwarts Legacy after a long day at work, and that's thanks to BenQ, who sent me this awesome X500i gaming projector through the Outpost service here in the UK. And not only was it super easy to set up by literally just plugging it into the wall and connecting my PS5 to it, but you don't need to be 20 meters away from it to actually get the projector into focus, which is wonderful because I am sat 1.5 meters away here and I'm getting 120 FPS at 4K quality with a 100-inch screen, which has actually blown my mind on how good projectors have become in the last few years, because when I think of projectors, I kind of think of sitting in a school assembly hall watching a 3080p presentation from 50 meters away, and perhaps I'm showing my age a little bit there, but that's not the case here with BenQ's X500i, because what I think is super cool is it actually allows you to resize the screen to fit the space that you have in your own home using this 2D digital zoom keystone setting that they have, and it also has this RPG gaming mode which adjusts the projector's picture and audio settings to get the best experience when playing games like Hogwarts Legacy. It works on Xbox, PlayStation, and even your Switch, by the way. So if you fancy playing games at 4K quality with their cinema screen at home, then definitely check it out. Very much worth the investment, in my opinion, after spending a lot of time with it over the last few weeks. I'll pop a link below the like button down below, and cheers to BenQ for supporting the channel. Now, there's another curse in the wizarding world called the Floating Eye Curse, which was an incantation that conjured a large floating eye to hover stationary over a specific area. It also emitted a red aura, which prevented people from passing through it. So a defense alarm mechanism, essentially, which would alert you to inbound intruders. Now, this could work wonderfully in game, where we could cast our eye and then take control of it to stealthily explore the area that we want to infiltrate before we actually entered it, marking enemies and their patrol routes ahead of time on our map, and also using it as a way to potentially identify weaknesses that specific enemies have, allowing us to be a little bit more specific and tactical in our choice of spells against them to defeat them quicker. Now, lore-wise, this eye can be dispelled with a simple knockback jinx. So if we get too close to enemies with our floating patrolling eye, then I wouldn't be surprised if they shot us down with that knockback jinx, just like archers do when using our eagle and Enkidu to spot guards in fortresses in the most recent Assassin's Creed game, Assassin's Creed Mirage. Now, whilst we're up in the air here, what I think would also be terrific for us to cast in the game is the equivalent of the Morsmorde spell, which was an incantation that summoned the Death Eaters by casting a terrifying skull into the sky, which you may be familiar with, or to alert people in the vicinity that reinforcements, dark wizards and witches were on the way. Now, of course, this game takes place 80 or so years before the First Wizarding War, which is where it was used repeatedly and became infamous. But as dark magic users in game, we could use an equivalent of this spell to summon temporary companions, students, or dark wizards that we've actually met on our quests to help us out. A kind of ultimate move in combat here, really, and to kind of reference Assassin's Creed again, similar to when Ezio then summons his assassins to then help him out in combat, which was really great fun to trigger in that game. But if you're not a dark wizard, you could use the Periculum incantation, which shot red sparks from a witch or wizard's wand into the air, summoning a magical flare, which could fulfill the same support mechanics as the Dark Mark that we just discussed. And I really would very much like to see this implemented in game. Some sort of companion or assist system like this when you're really in a pinch would be really great fun to have. Now, what I'd also love to see added as some sort of epic side quest, which could also be optional for players who wanted to engage with the dark arts, would be the creation of a Horcrux, which is an object where a dark wizard or witch hid a fragment of their own soul in, allowing them to then become immortal as long as that object wasn't destroyed. Now, to create a Horcrux, one would have to commit murder as a means to tear your own soul apart, followed by a very dark magic incantation, with Herpo the Foul in ancient Greece being one of the first documented wizards known to have actually created a Horcrux. Now, we can kill a lot of enemies in this game with the Killing Curse, so that's not in question here, but perhaps we can get some extra utility out of it by tearing our own soul after each Avada Kedavra, which would allow us to be able to cash in a Horcrux in our own inventory, meaning that we would be able to automatically resurrect ourselves if we were killed by an enemy in-game. In fact, Avatar Frontiers of Pandora had this mechanic available most recently, where if you died, you can instantly res. So perhaps we can complete a quest where we learn how to do this by picking up that Dark Arts book in the restricted section of the library that we've, of course, already seen in-game, but let's wait and see on that. Now, as mentioned earlier, I've got 10 more Hogwarts Legacy spells that I think will be in the game in the future, so click the video on your screen right now, or on my face right now, and I'll see you there in just a second. Big thanks to Nika for helping me make this video. As usual, Butterbeer is on her, and hopefully I'll see you in that next video in just a second.